Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of a limited liability company, also known as an LLC. Now, I've talked about corporations, I've talked about lots of different topics, but this is probably going to be one of the most important ones for you because the importance of an LLC or knowing the pros and the cons can really help you make the decision on which one is correct for you. Now, that being said, you're going to want to talk to an attorney and possibly a CPA to really nail down what is the right entity for your choice. So these pros and cons are going to help you, but the truth is that you're going to want to make sure you're still consulting with people that can give you specific advice as opposed to just general answers to questions. Google is great for that, but unfortunately it doesn't always give you the right answer. And so you really want to consult someone local in your area. If you're new here, my name is Taylor Darcy from Think Legal, where I help you create the business of your dreams. So welcome. I'm excited to have you. We go live every Monday through Friday, except for holidays, to discuss important topics, to answer your questions, and to just contribute to the legal community. We're live on YouTube. We're looking at moving to Facebook as well, to adding Facebook as one of our lives, but we're not sure we're going to go there yet. But I just wanted to throw that out there as a thing. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back. I always like to start with the cons first because when you start, it really narrows down your entity choice when you're considering pros and your cons, but I like to always end on a high note as well. So the number one reason an LLC or the con for an LLC as opposed to a sole proprietor is taxes. In California, the minimum tax for an LLC is $800. So that's not a small chunk of change that you have to, it's a minimum tax. It's not a maximum, but that's what just by starting an LLC, you have to spend that money to do that. Now, it's not due immediately. Don't confuse that with starting the LLC, which is a different set of fees. But the tax that's involved with the LLC is the cost that you're going to want to pay attention to first. So there are additional costs with starting an LLC over doing a sole proprietorship. But I believe strongly that the pros outweigh the cons, and we're going to talk about those. So that the first con is your taxes. They're going to automatically go up. Now, there is a central part just so your reference is that a sole proprietor starts out with a zero tax and an LLC starts out at an $800 tax. But a sole proprietor will catch up to an LLC at about, and I mean, this is just depends, and you should see a tax advisor, at about $24,000. So if you've made $24,000 from your business, you may be having to pay that in taxes either way. And so you might as well have the LLC to go with it. So it really depends. That's why it's so important that you're fact specific and you talk with an advisor about this, because the answer is, it depends. And that's a favorite thing that attorneys are known for, but it really does depend on whether or not what you're looking for, but also where you're currently at and whether you would transition into an LLC from a sole proprietor. Can you start out as a sole proprietor and move into an LLC? Yes. Is there more work with it? Unfortunately, that does make more work. So it's easier to start out as one entity and stay with it than it is to move from one entity to another. Just logistically, cost-wise, I think marketing, brand recognition, lots of reasons to start with one and keep it. So the number two con, if you will, is that in the formalities, there are not many formalities to keep up with in an LLC, but you do have some minor stuff, but it's important to recognize that that's a con. The next thing is limited alienability. Your membership interest in an LLC is harder to transfer to somebody new over a corporation. A corporation is a much simpler, relatively speaking, process because of the way that corporation is set up. So that's a con. So if it's something that you're thinking about selling, it may be better to do a corporation over an LLC because of that limited alienability that goes with an LLC. Next thing is, with an LLC, it's very closely tied to the owner, just as in a sole proprietor. And so it's a lot harder to get additional capital for an LLC than it is to get for a corporation because of that difference between those two. There's limited ways to grow your business. You're pretty much restricted to debt only when it comes to an LLC, same as you are with the sole proprietor. So the last con, if you will, is that an LLC dissolves upon death. Now, you can, if you create a trust, make the trust the member of the LLC, and that's a way to perpetuate it beyond death, because then the trust is the member instead of you, and a trust can perpetuate beyond death. But if you just make it strictly in your name, then it dissolves upon death, and there's really no way around that. Versus a corporation, on the other hand, it does not dissolve upon death. It can exist indefinitely. So that's a very important point to recognize. The pros of an LLC are that, relatively speaking to a corporation, they're kind of like the middle child of everything. Sole proprietors are the easiest to start, LLCs are next, and then corporations, if you will. So a corporation is fairly easy to start, all things considered. There's There's articles of organization with the Secretary of State, and there are, you want to have an operating agreement, business license, everything that's required from your local area. But that's that's it. And so it's fairly easy. A corporation is a little bit more challenging. You also want to get an EIN if you're doing an LLC. An LLC gives you a lot of benefit, and we're going to talk more about those in just a second. But you want to make sure that you're picking not just the easiest entity to start, but the best entity for you long term. That's an important part of it. The relative startup costs for an LLC is also low. So it's easier to start, fairly low startup costs. It's really kind of the perfect entity for most businesses, because unless you're planning on selling something, it's a non-issue. Or unless you're planning on selling the business, it's a non-issue. So those things that I talked about are important within that context. But if it's just you and you're never planning on selling your business, if you're not worried about getting getting additional capital, then an LLC is right for a lot of businesses. But it's important to know when it's not right, okay? Now, the number one reason or number one pro to a limited liability company is that it creates what we call a legal shield between you and your personal assets and the assets of the business, which means that if something goes wrong with the business, they can't come and take your personal assets. And so there's certain instances in which case you're going to want to make sure you have an LLC set up. And that's if you have a home, if you have an employee that creates third-party liability, so on and so forth. So those are all important things to remember, but it is not unlimited limited liability. In other words, you do have some liability. And if you create an LLC with the intent to defraud, or if you're using it as your personal piggy bank, or it's undercapitalized, they can still pierce the corporate veil. So you can't put everything you own in an LLC and expect it to protect you in that respect. You can only put what's relevant to the business in an LLC and have it protect you. So that's a very important part. So all of these things combine to give you a liability shield that can help your business grow. Another pro is that it's a real established entity. You look more official. You look like an actual business because you are an actual business. A sole proprietor doesn't have that same luxury. And you also have lots of liability. Your And you have unlimited liability. Everything you own is at risk if you don't have an LLC, which creates an issue, especially if you have a home or have any substantial assets. Even if you have no assets, the idea that someone could come after you and attach your wages is what could happen in a LLC, then, or non-LLC, sorry, I apologize, then you're really risking a lot. So those costs that are associated with it are fairly minimal that allow you to give the best to your business and allow you to protect your interests and not be worried about those issues that go with a limited or a small business sole proprietor type scenario. If you've gotten value out of this video, don't forget to hit subscribe or like and hit that bell icon to be notified when we go live. Have a great day.